After over a decade since the cliffhanger ending to Rebellion, the main story of Madoka Magica will continue soon, with the release of Walpurgisnacht Rising. Now, I've read all of your comments and speculation. I've watched the two very intricate and very informationally dense trailers. I've read some quite out there takes, and I've filtered together 5 of the most potent, most interesting, and most probable theories that you can expect from the 4th Madoka Magica film.
We need to talk about something interesting.
Let's not waste your time or attention and dive right into the first, most prominent theory that has been widely accepted and supported with evidence that we can see from these trailers. Though it's very clear from the outset that there is certainly more than one Homura to be participating in this movie, not all Homuras are perhaps created equal. We can see Homucifer in both trailers. We can see what I believe to be Homura Prime, or Homura from episode 12 in the poster as well. And then we can see some other Homura. A Homura that looks a bit different than you might expect at first glance. This Homura is sporting a headband with a peculiar pattern, not one that we have seen from anyone we know as Homura, with the crossed white stripe or gray stripe on top of a black headband. And if you want to challenge yourself, quickly, what color were Homura's eyes? That's right, they were always purple. You can see many times throughout the series. However, during this dance with Madoka in the trailer, this Homura, we will call her, has distinctly red, or pink even, eyes, possibly belying the fact that her Homura-ness is merely a glamour or a facade. If we add on the fact that this dummy Homura is shown curling her hair, looking at herself in her compact mirror, caring about her appearance, that's probably a large indication that her appearance is necessary for her function in the story. So with 2 confirmed aspects of Homura, and then a 3rd masquerading as Homura, do we expect the entire plot of Walpurgisnacht Rising to be equivalent to that one Spider-Man meme? Well, no. We have a good indication of who this faux Homura is. The headband she wears is shared by one of Homura's Clara doll familiars, which we can see still associated with Homucifer, even after Homulily has been removed from the story at the end of Rebellion. So presumably, this dummy Homura is maintaining her position as an agent of Homucifer. This becomes less of a jump if you think about in both trailers we have seen the Homucifer representation to be bound and defeated. It seems pretty clear that this is the way Homucifer is taking agency on the events of the story, even while apparently being defeated. While the evidence is quite strong here, and I have no doubt that we will see some duplicity involving Homura's means, this all seems a bit obvious or understandable in a way that makes it seem that maybe it won't be the final resolution or the ultimate Keikaku Tori flip on Homucifer's plans in Walpurgisnacht Rising, simply because Urobuchi does not write that way. Nor would Shinbo and the rest of Shaft reveal every twist and turn to us in the trailer. I think truly that they're expecting you, the fan, to walk in the door of the film, knowing that this Homura we see is most likely one of her Clara dolls. Or this will be revealed to everyone watching the film, and everyone brought up to speed on this within the first 30 or so minutes. While that's great for dramatic tension and pacing of the film, we have to look further. What could Homucifer's end goals be with trying to disguise her identity? Or is she perhaps not the mastermind here, and this disguise is an act of agency on her familiars after she is defeated? Since she was the one holding all the cards at the end of Rebellion, we have to find something very interesting to put her on the back foot. My guess would be the introduction of Homura Prime coming back from episode 12, with the Clara dolls interacting with the rest of the cast as we see in their dance with Madoka. Perhaps they're trying to influence the rest of the quintet. Perhaps they're trying not to deceive, but to remember. To realize the daily life together with Madoka that Homura herself never got access to. Perhaps the plot of the film is a bit more about Homura's reconciliation than her division. But your theories are just as good as mine here, so do take time to go down to the comments and give your best take on whether or not Homura knows about the actions of the Clara dolls, and why she perhaps even allowed herself to be defeated and captured at the beginning of the film. What is her ultimate end goal? Before we get into our second theory, I want to briefly say that I will be making much more content for Madoka Magica and Walpurgisnacht Rising, including interviews, theories, and analysis videos. And if you haven't already watched my Madoka Magica series, please go find that on my channel, subscribe, and follow me on my Patreon, where you can keep up to date on everything that I will be making in the future. Our second theory has its genesis with one visual symbol in particular. These very dark, very out of place collars on their school uniforms. Though everyone involved in Mitakihara shares the same school uniform, never did we see them with black upper collars. This is a very striking visual metaphor that causes us to group together the dummy Homura we talked about earlier, as well as the new characters of the green-haired girl and the orange-haired girl. These other two new characters, without any background information, are pretty clearly magical girls, but using this visual symbol, we can assume they're ostensibly allied with Homucifer as well. But here's the very interesting thing, and again metagaming Urobuchi a bit. Urobuchi does not make three characters that all function in the same way. These characters exist, and since they are independent, even though they are on the same side, they must necessarily have either different roles in the story, or they have different objectives or means by going about their objective, even if it is shared. Let's look at the wings of the Magius, right? Even in aligned goals, they manifest those objectives with different actions. And it's not like Homucifer is the champion of cooperation and teamwork, or internal consistency for that matter. So perhaps these three girls could be independent agents representing Homucifer's internal desires, each in conflict or cooperation with the others and with the rest of the quintet. Let's, for a brief assumption, say that these two new magical girls are not Clara dolls. The other idea would be that they are magical girls who joined Homucifer of their own volition, due to whatever backstories or worldviews they hold on their own. In this way, they could be much like fallen angels joining Lucifer, for reasons unknown, but perhaps that will be explored. And then we end up at a very fun Castlevania Season 3 have to resurrect Dracula trope. We aren't without any context for these two new magical girls, however. The green-haired girl has been suggested to be a possible classmate from the original series. The witch Quittieri from the PSP game, and also shows up in the concept movie as an original character design, where she sports a cage-like costume, mirroring the cage that she can be seen in the second trailer. She also has a ring and a mark on her middle finger, a representation we've seen in many other magical girls, leading us to believe that she probably is a magical girl rather than a familiar. The orange-haired girl, likewise, has been associated with the teddy girl from the Sagitta Luminis section of episode 12, where Madoka is healing all the magical girls throughout all of time, the teddy girl ostensibly from the future. I can't say that I myself buy into these associations to prior characters. That necessitates us to further connect them to Homucifer through something either provided by the film or backstory and exposition, which may take too much time away from the quintet. However, I think it's very clear that these girls are associated with more evil connotations, particularly in this screenshot. We can see books that are in this movie associated with witches in the history of magical girls. We can see the orange-haired girl with her eyes cut out. We see her associated too with Cube. If you possibly suspect that Cube will remain docile and innocent since being robbed of power and agency by Homucifer, if you suspect that it will not be an influence on the plot of Walpurgisnacht Rising, well, you've either forgotten that Homucifer herself is bound and defeated in this film, or you may be interested in this fantastic business opportunity that I'd love to tell you about after the video. Perhaps the orange-haired girl is making her stand at reviving Homucifer through the actions of and power of Cube, whereas the green-haired girl takes a more collaborative approach, directly interacting with the quintet, and the dummy Homura Clara doll tries to have Madoka remember the positive influence of Homura on her life and sway her in that way. But these are all just speculations, though I feel confident that these three will be a solid influence on how the movie develops. There's yet another piece that has some sort of outsized impact on the plot of Walpurgisnacht Rising. That is a 4-minute short from late 2015 called, colloquially, the concept movie. There's a lot of evidence for this, including aforementioned green-haired girl, the bandaged Sayaka first seen in the concept movie, and Madoka's outfit returning. But perhaps the most solid evidence being that Urobuchi finished the script for Walpurgisnacht Rising somewhere between 2014 to 2016. The concept movie was always a bit of a conundrum among the fandom, a fandom that is already full of plenty such conundrums. There's no real evidence of a storyline there, just a lump of ideas, very unrefined, some creative decisions that perhaps are showing up again more fully fleshed out and realized. Although we don't know quite what the concept movie was aiming to do, we can take some assumptions away. For instance, it seems that Walpurgisnacht Rising will have some degree of similarity in aesthetics, notably those of ballet, featuring Swan Lake, Nutcracker, the dying swan imagery. Now, is this just window dressing, or is there something that they're saying here? Retrospectively, Rebellion had trappings, many things in the background, made with intention certainly, but perhaps not the most straightforward in how it affected the plot or characters of the show. So should we expect some direct references to perhaps Swan Lake, which has its own story of deception and hiding things in plain view? Or should we perhaps look towards another Magical Girl series, where Madoka's outfit reminds very heavily of another of my favorites, Princess Tutu? Though we've known this for a while, Homucifer's design looks very eerily similar to Princess Crahy's. New Madoka's ballet seems to very much match Duck's, and there is a large ballet sequence in Princess Tutu, even just apart from the two heroines, that has direct influence on the climax of that show. Is ballet simply a performance? Is it a symbol for beauty and aesthetics and enjoying the performance in front of you? Or is it a callback to some specific reference, whether Princess Tutu or Swan Lake or something else entirely? The concept movie also showcases a more forgotten character in recent Madoka fandom. Putting aside Magi Records cameo, I don't really want to talk about that. Mami. Mami features front and center in the concept movie with her incredible galactic railgun and giant stone head come crashing down to Earth. Though she was kept invalidated and bereft of much agency in Rebellion, one of my big criticisms, and she's only really used functionally in the original show's first 3 episodes to get the narrative where it needs to be. Perhaps, if the concept movie can be believed, we will see her have another role or function in this film, as she is confirmed to be returning, but no evidence yet in what dynamic or doing what. Though Sayaka has her arc, Kyoko and Mami just seem to be present for now. I'm sure Urobuchi won't leave them just as fan service or eye candy, but what will Mami's role finally be? Will she be the leader that was promised in the Holy Quintet? Or will it be something else, with her going through some sort of arc in the film? This ties into the final confirmation from the concept trailer portion, being that the Walpurgisnacht Rising will be, quote, the start of a new chapter. Though Madoka Magica has seen various spin-offs and successes to varying degrees in different extended media, and with the stories of other magical girls in its world, the original characters were made for one 12-episode play, and they strutted and fretted their hour upon the stage in said play. And when it ended, their character arcs completed, there was little and less else for them to do. However, now there's a new open ending. There's new character arcs to explore, and not just revenge to be taken on Homucifer. If there's anything that I would feel confident predicting, it's that Madoka Magica Walpurgisnacht Rising will end with some sort of new overarching goal or objective. We can expect catalysts from the new characters, as well as Homura's reconciliation with herself and with the Holy Quintet. However, what the status quo will be, and what the new quest will be, that's a very interesting and very hard thing to predict. Perhaps we can suss out some ideas by looking at our next theory. Who is Walpurgisnacht? For all these hints, there's not a single one of them that even mentions, insinuates, or points towards the title of the film. Kaiten, doing it again, going back, revolving. There's quite a bit of different meaning in the Japanese, and yet neither the Japanese nor the English gives us any sort of headway into understanding what Walpurgisnacht has to do with anything we've been shown so far, or even expect to be shown. Why is Walpurgisnacht back after the events of Rebellion? For something to happen after Madoka erases all witches in episode 12, it seems a bit odd. We can make some headway with the latest trailer showing us Sayaka exploring the books encased in epoxy, and perhaps associating them with witches in general. However, that doesn't tell us the full picture. If the witches are kept and stored away, ostensibly by Homucifer, and then soon to be liberated by Sayaka's efforts, as seen with Octavia flashing for one frame in the trailer, that still doesn't explain the continuity. Walpurgisnacht exists and is disposed of long before Homucifer. This is all compiled onto the already existing question mark of what Walpurgisnacht was from the original series. One of the only bits of information we are granted is that it was a collection of witches. Though this matches with the real-life meaning of Walpurgisnacht, a gathering of witches in the mountains in Germany, we still find it a bit odd that a witch would be formed from a collection of magical girls, as witches usually represent the breaking apart of social bonds, the failure to communicate, the antithetical elements to the traditional magical girl friendship team. And on top of that, we still have to square the circle of the timeline. There's a couple bits of speculation held over from the original series regarding Walpurgisnacht. During the airing of episode 10, many suspected that Homura's wish would be Walpurgisnacht, and she was fighting her own future self. While that is thematically very fun to think about, Homulily exists, so that doesn't really fit. But then again, we do have quite a few more Homuras right now than we did in the past, and perhaps Homulili isn't the only representation of Homura's witch form. We also have quite a few more Madokas than previously. With the law of the cycles being split in two, now Madoka is two beings, and conceivably could have two witches. Kriemhild Gretchen's other half was often thought to be Walpurgisnacht, due to the hourglass symbol that they form when stacked on top of each other. This would also make Homucifer responsible for Walpurgisnacht, something that she could never herself defeat, and is quite thematically juicy as well. Perhaps we could graft Walpurgisnacht onto what we know from the new characters. The green-haired girl, the orange-haired girl. I like less so more than the Clara dolls coming together. We do see the familiars of Walpurgisnacht dance in a collective way that reminds very much of Homura's familiars. So perhaps some type of formation from familiars, as is hinted at in episode 4 of the show, could be what creates Walpurgisnacht. There's also the character from the first trailer, who we don't see again in the second trailer, the one that bears many of the aesthetic symbols of the quintet. Some aesthetic combination of at least Homura and Madoka and Mami. Perhaps that fusion is all we need and no further. My best guess, however, would be that Walpurgisnacht is not indeed the villain that it was portrayed as in the original series, but instead something of a force for good. Some sort of combination of the main characters in a spirit bomb cooperation to overcome the deception of Homucifer. Now, it doesn't really make sense then why Walpurgisnacht would show up in the original series, and I think this is best described by the Rising in the title. In some way, maybe this is not the sequel to Rebellion, but also the prequel to what came before. Maybe there's some time nonsense that we can get into if Homura herself is involved. It's clear that the movie will need to tie back into the 12 episodes of the original series to justify its title, so maybe, just maybe, we can undo Homucifer before she even begins. I'll pause here and mention a couple honorable mentions. There's some symbols here that are very interesting and juicy, but can't really be deciphered into full theories. First is all the tarot symbology. We see a lot, from the moon from trailer 1 to various symbols here and there. Certainly will be one of those aesthetic trappings that come to fruition, but in which way and what it's telling us, well, that's for you tarot fans to know and figure out. Leave it in the comments below if you find something interesting. There's also a lot of revolutions. I mean by that fan symbology, matching the windmills in the original series and the pinwheels in Rebellion. Is this more than just a simple aesthetic trapping, or a general motif of doing things over again for what we know will be a movie focusing on repeating the past? Who's to say? Perhaps add in the phone and the coils, symbols that we see repeated throughout the trailer as well, making a call back to the past. And so we arrive at the final piece of speculation for Walpurgisnacht Rising. And this one, I'm sorry to say, is quite meta and very simple. Perhaps I think we will see Walpurgisnacht far sooner than we may have expected. Though originally announced for winter of 2024, we had no word on when the release date might come until we received word about a month ago that the date was shifted from winter 2024 to winter 2025. This is ambiguous in ways that is very unsettling, because winter 2024, in one definition, could be December of 2024. I actually asked my sensei at language school if the winter seasonal label operated the same in Japanese as it does in English, and she confirmed that indeed it does. There's no cultural context that we're missing. It's simply just a confusing release date. Though many of us have expected winter 2025 to mean December of 2025, perhaps we might see it in January or February. We do have the re-release of Rebellion coming to Japanese theaters, though that in and of itself doesn't tell us overly much. We also have Blu-ray re-releases of the films coming again sooner rather than later. But perhaps the biggest evidence that you may be able to see Walpurgisnacht Rising in January is that in the Aniplex US trailer for the second trailer of Walpurgisnacht Rising, soon is said instead of winter 2025. It seems rather hard to believe that soon would be in 14 months, but instead rather more like 3. Remember that the original airing of Madoka Magica was met with very little fanfare, as its mysteries were intended to be kept a secret until at least episode 3. In the same way, I think there may be an understated PR rollout for the fourth Madoka Magica film, perhaps relying on more word of mouth and fan engagement until right before the release date. Either way, I will be extremely excited to go to the theaters along with you all and check out what awaits for us from Shaft, Shinbo, and Urabuchi, and the rest. I'm so incredibly excited, and I hope you engage in crafting your own theories and predictions. And perhaps I will even share more of your predictions if you leave good ones in the comments. So stay tuned for next time when we continue our discussion of Puella Magi, Madoka Magica.